All right, welcome back. This is the latest episode of Golden Nuggets. I'm Earl Duby. I got Jackie over here behind the camera here. She doesn't like to make an appearance, but Jackie, I would like to point out that I was reading this article today, and this is amazing. You know about the CrowdStrike outage that happened a few weeks ago, right?
Yep.
So there were actually two events that were happening simultaneously. So you had an Azure outage, so Microsoft's cloud platform was experiencing some issues, and then right after that, like hours after this, the CrowdStrike flawed update got pushed out, and then that caused a bunch of issues with the Windows machines. So Windows was having, their issues. Microsoft was having Azure issues, and all of this was happening early Friday morning. And then we all know how that, worked out with the airlines, delaying flights, canceling flights. People were hanging out in cities that they didn't want to be in for an extra 2 or 3 days as all of this stuff was getting sorted out. So the cool thing, and the only reason I'm bringing this back up, because I know this thing has been hashed to death, back then. Even Jackie was tired of hearing about it, and she's not even a technologist. But so we know that all that was happening. But the interesting thing that is bringing this back to light is the fact that, Delta is now, because of all these delays and flights being canceled, and I can just imagine the number of frequent flyer miles that they had to award to people through all of this just to keep their customers happy. So at the end of the day, Delta is suing Microsoft for about $500 million. So that's the impact of all of this IT outage on Delta. I mean, overall, I think they were saying that, and this was several days ago, they said that the overall economic impact of this was going to be $5.4 billion, and I'm sure it's only gotten higher since then. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's $6 or $7 billion worth of economic impact. But again, the thing I want to talk about today is this article that I just read on CNN Business, and we'll put a link to this article in the notes here. But so Microsoft is now countering to Delta that it's actually Delta's fault that they had all these outages because, and here's the headline. You can see it right here. Microsoft lashes out at Delta. Your ancient tech caused the service meltdown. So I find this fascinating because, this has been happening for years and years and years. Some software will push an update, and then, some system won't be able to take the update and it'll crash. And then everyone complains about the software update, when in fact, they should actually be looking at the system that is trying to be updated. Because chances are you're trying to push an update to old, dilapidated hardware, and it just can't take it, and it crashes and burns, and then systems fail and everyone's all up in arms. So I think this is actually pretty cool for me to see that, on the one hand, Delta comes out and says, hey, we had this big impact, it's Microsoft's fault. And then Microsoft is coming back at it and saying, no, this is because you haven't updated your systems for so long. And the reason that this is kind of great for me is, I've been pushing vulnerability management and having proper vulnerability management practices for years. Like, to me, you really can't run an IT organization unless you know where your flaws are at, where your open windows, where your open doors, where your end-of-life servers, where your applications missing critical updates. You have to know this stuff. I don't know how you can run an IT organization if you don't know these things. And this is a perfect example of what happens when you don't take care of your environment. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Microsoft is probably right, that Delta hasn't been keeping their systems up to date, and that they are running end-of-life systems. And then this, update comes along, it's a CrowdStrike update, it's a Microsoft update, it's a, who knows what update. But if your systems aren't built or current enough to handle those updates, that technology debt is going to catch up to you eventually. So if you are skimping on doing updates and not keeping your systems up to date, and that can be on the hardware side or it could be on the software and application side, this is what's going to happen. And I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see how this plays out, because it's going to go to court. So Delta's going to sue Microsoft. Microsoft's going to counter back and say you're at least partially to blame because you're not keeping your systems up to date. Somehow that's going to get adjudicated. And it'll be interesting to see if Microsoft can deflect $500 million worth of a lawsuit based on the fact that Delta, its customer, is not keeping its systems up to date. And I would really like to follow this closely, because I think this is an example that all people that manage systems need to keep track of. As we get more reliant on software, and more reliant on automatic updates, because think about your Windows patches, you probably have that on auto update. Think about your antivirus updates. All of those are on auto update. They're pushing those things out whenever they find new threats, and they're constantly getting you that data or those updates quickly. So your life is already on some sort of auto update schedule. That's going to make it even more critical to make sure that your underlying systems and hardware are up to date, patched, and ready to go. So keep an eye on this story. In the meantime, it's a rough world out there. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time for our next Golden Nugget. Thank you.